You're listening to KCAA Loma Linda at 106.5 FM, K293CF Moreno Valley.
Welcome to the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show, created and hosted by Scott Knudsen, to explore the crossroads of horses and business. Now here's your host, Scott Knudsen.
Hello and welcome to the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show. I'm your host, Scott Knudsen, and whether you're listening to us on the radio on KCAA, our great NBC affiliate out in California, or watching our podcast on one of our many platforms, we really appreciate you. Today we have a super fun show for you. Marvin Schroeder is on the show today. He's a weapons master. He's an armorer. There's so many things he does in the movie and TV industry. He does props. He's been a wrangler. He is his IMDb list is just incredible to even look at. We were just talking about that. He also started the Frontier History company, and he's also a historical coordinator. So he knows his history, knows exactly what guns or what props need to go with what movie. So we're really blessed to have him on the show. And a little backstory: Steve Riley is our producer for the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show, and he's also executive director of the Fredericksburg Theater Company. And Marvin is doing a live theater show. He's at rehearsal, so we're using the theater office. So long intro, but Marvin, you deserve it. Thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, it's so much fun. And just, oh my goodness, all the stories before you even hit record. I just love it. And I love the Western industry, and I love what you do for it. You keep it real. And that's so important, that the history doesn't get lost over the years.
Right.
And, can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing, your education, and what led to this incredible career?
Well, it's kind of weird. I was born and raised in San Antonio until I was 13, and Dad decided he didn't want his boys growing up in that big city, so he moved us back to his hometown, which is Lavernia, population 633, but he didn't tell me I was kin to everybody. So the first bad news was, well, you can't date any of the girls. I'm going, why? Because they might be cousins. I'm going, well, that's not fun.
No.
So, but my uncles was the sheriff, my dad was the justice of peace, so I couldn't do anything. But I've always been a history buff, and we were always out in the field, working and stuff, and it just fell in that place. And with all my uncles coming out of World War II, my dad in World War II, it just naturally got into history. Well, what I got fascinated with in that world was everybody else reads stuff, right? Well, my reading was military manuals. Now, does that sound boring or what? But what I did is I started collecting them, and it's like, okay. So how did they march in 1789, or 1812 or 8? So I got to doing that. And what's fun is then you watch movies and you realize, oh my God, these guys are terrible. And I grew up loving these movies, but they're really not correct. So that's where these film crew and people like that realized I could bring that to the table and say, I can teach them how to do this correctly. And that's kind of what I started with. But it's just a love of the history and reading it, making it right. You're absolutely right. And watching these six guns that never run out of bullets, and of course back then I didn't understand why they did that. Well, the reason was it takes time, and they didn't want to spend the time showing that on film. Well, the more you can actually bring some of that in, then it shows that's real time, and they see what would really happen. You never see a gun jam. And that was also too, that always got me, and it says, wait a minute. These things jam all the time. How does this not work? So that's what I bring to the table.
I love it. And growing up in a small town, there's no secrets, is there?
No, not at all. It's like, and, I graduated with a sum total of 13 kids in my class. So I always tell people I graduated in the top quarter. Well, there's only 13 of us, so figure the math.
Yeah.
Fun with that. Yeah.
That's
and then,
awesome.
Of course, you bounce around the world out there, and I got to playing in country western music field. And in the 60s, we saw a change in the country and western because we were coming out of the older style of western music. My dad played the German accordion, so I played behind him. I played the guitar, and we had a little four-piece western band. Well, we would dress up as 1880 cowboys. And it was just fun because our name fit that kind of at the time, the Westerners, and it was just neat. Well, then from one thing led to another. And I ran into different people that were doing Western stuff, and some of the horse riding and stuff you get to take it. I'll tell you a little fun story. Well, I was working for a guy down there who had cattle, and he decided all of his boys riding around on horses were having too much fun. He thought it'd be cheaper, so one year he bought 14 old Army Jeeps, and we're going to herd all these Angus cattle, a couple of thousand of them with Jeeps. Well, in less than a week, there was no Jeep running. There was 3 kids in the hospital, and we just wrecked them, you know. And he said, maybe we need to go back to horses. It was a little safer, so we went back to horses pretty quick. But yeah, it was fun growing up doing that, you know.
Oh, that's so cool. So when y'all were playing music out on the road, did you ever come across somebody singing or a band that everybody would know that was neat to run across?
Oh yes, we were house bands for a couple of places. There's a place called the Farmer's Daughter in San Antonio, which is an old established country music venue, and it was older folk could go there. But one night we were the house band there on a Sunday afternoon, playing between noon and 4, just you feel in the atmosphere. And it was kind of funny because the guy that ran it, he came up to me at about 4 o'clock and he said, "We got a problem. Our headliner supposed to be here tonight. He's here, but his band is snowed in Denver." Okay, he said, "Can you play?" So he played a couple of pieces of his music, and we're going, "Oh yeah, we can do that." It was Charlie Pride, so we played with him.
Oh my goodness!
So we're playing with him that night. We get through, and he calls his manager, and he says, "Tell the band to stay home. I got a band here already." So we played with him for a week there in San Antonio, and the fun thing, watching Willie Nelson grow up because we were from San Antonio, and remember Porter Wagoner, all those fancy outfits that studied out.
Absolutely,
that's where Willie was. In that same agenda, and
wow.
We played in a dance in Seguin, and Ray Price, and bless his heart, he was a good singer, but he liked the bottle too much. Well, he got a little over the top, and they had to grab their backup, which was Willie Nelson before he was famous. He was the writer. He wrote all those songs. So he was standing there going like, "What do I do?" And I said, "Sing the songs you've been."
That's good advice.
Yeah, just start singing songs. So we were his band that night over in Seguin, and he just took off and didn't sing for several years. Then I watched him change and go into his motif. And when I was
Really
a little girl one time and filmed a movie with him, a little Western thing he did, Willie Nelson.
Oh wow!
Yeah, he had a little Western town he built out there, and he wanted to be in the acting world too. I think some point, and he's done a little bit in that. But yeah, so it's just fun.
Awesome, man! It's so cool your stories and just you made yourself available in the right spot. And
Right.
took advantage of that.
I ran into a gentleman in the early 90s that was a big-time coordinator for movies. He did a lot of the bigger movies that had a lot of soldiers and stuff, and he would hire me to come in and said, "Well, we need a guy to be the coordinator." And so in 96, we did a movie called Rough Riders for TNT TV, and they hired me as the historical trainer. So I'm running around out there training all these extras at all the time. We started at Palestine, came to Conroe, then wound up in Bandera. Well, so I'm the military trainer for all these different armies, right? We created. We get down to Bandera, and somewhere in that line, Tom Berenger is going to be, Teddy Roosevelt, right? So Teddy Roosevelt spoke several languages, and he was very big into the French and the German, all that. So he came out to me with the script, and he says, "Hey, I want you to be able to. Can you tell me what this is?" Everybody said, "You speak German." I said, "Well, I'm Bishop, not a lot, a little bit." And I read this thing, and I'm looking at, who in the hell wrote this? Half of it didn't make sense. Well, it was written by the director. So I'm telling him, I said, "Well, why don't you go meet the director?" We show up in front of the director. He's sitting in his big chair, and he's sitting there smoking a cigar, and he says, "What do you think of that script?" And I said, "Well, whoever wrote this German don't know what the hell they're talking about." And all of a sudden, I noticed Tom Berenger, everybody's moving away from me like this, and I get this, I'm looking around, and he goes, "What are you looking at?" I said, "Well, I figured I just got fired if you wrote that script." And he said, "I did." And he said, "What is it?" And I said, "Well, you've mixed military with different stuff." So we trimmed it from 6 pages down to like 3. Okay, fine. So we're down in Bandera now with Kettle Hill and San Juan Hill. We're doing attacking all this. Where comes Berenger riding up on his horse with a guy following him on a 4-wheeler with the light blue uniform. He said, "Marvin, here's your costume. You need to get dressed in this." And I said, "What?" He said, "Well, you're the German advisor. We're going to capture you, but we got to have that dialogue. We're learning that German with me. Well, you got to be the bad guy at that." So I'm training all the guys to win. Now I'm also the bad guy. What do you think happened on the first take? All 250 men I've been training targets me, and they're coming up that hill, coming after Marvin, not staying in their lanes and wanting to attack the whole front, And so the director, cut. "What are y'all doing?" "We're going to kill Marvin. He's trained us to do this, and we've run up that hill 6 times. We're going to get him, So it was kind of like, okay.
Oh, my God. Fun. Well, I promise you, this is the first time in Cowboy Entrepreneur history somebody went from Charlie Pride to Tom Berenger. So thanks for that.
Yeah, we've done a few things and had some fun.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Well, growing up in Lavernia, did you just say one day, reading your history books and studying the manuals, that I want to do this incredible career, or did something just lead you on the path?
It accidentally led into it because I'd done some plays there at the Fredericksburg School, and then with the military, I joined the Army in '67 by two choices: either you join, you get drafted back then. Unfortunately, I didn't last very long in the Army. My dad suddenly had contracted cancer, and he died at age 48. So I was sent home to take care of my family, my mom, and I still had three brothers there, and one was only 5 years. I'm 19-year-old than my baby brother, and that was a surprise to all of us. So I came back home to do that, and I just got into, I wanted to do more. And I get a call that said, hey, look, we're doing this play on this storyline about World War II. And so I helped that, and it led one thing led to another. Well, then in the 80s and 90s, you start developing more love for it, and it just led to that. I started working with Parks and Wildlife, Texas Parks and Wildlife at the Battleship Texas. And we would dress out the ship with soldiers and sailors and Marines on it and do living history. And they would interpret the ship. Well, then they said, well, you know all this history. Can you tell us about 1836? Probably, since my great-great-grandfather fought there. And they went, what? So I created their little battle scenes they would do down, the reenactments they would do down there. And the next thing you know, they said, well, the Nimitz Museum is looking for a coordinator. Well, then I came up here in 1990.
To Fredericksburg, Texas.
Yes, sir, to Admiral Nimitz Museum. At that time is what we called it. Now it's the National Museum of the Pacific War. And we created their living history program out there. So here in the middle of Fredericksburg is a Japanese battlefield, which we built. And we're running tanks and shooting machine guns and flamethrowers. And people in town are going like, is there something going on we should know about? So we'd always have to call the police department and say we're doing this, and they got used to us. But the funnest thing I did one time was took our Sherman tank and drove it across the street on Main Street to the gas station and filled it up with gas. And watching the traffic going like, there's a tank on Main Street, you know. And, of course, the police department knew all this, and they just had fun with it. They're going like, yeah, watch this. Yeah. But I never will forget, we had a World War II veteran that lives about 5 miles out of town. And every weekend we did that show, he'd come in to see the show. We'd always let him in as a veteran. And he said, you know, I know when you're going to do that show. And he said, I can always hear it. And I said, 5 miles out? He said, yeah, I can hear that 50 cal machine gun. When it shoots, you can hear that 5 miles away.
Wow.
And I'm going, wow. You know, so that's what I did for until 17. But in between all that time, you know, you get one movie after another and just looked into them. So I've done some real cheesy movies, some horror movies, and it's a job. And working with all the guns I've worked with over the years and have a nice gun collection of stuff, and been able to teach actors how not to shoot themselves in the foot with a blank, you know, kind of thing. There's protocols that we created. And, of course, I belong to the International Museum of Stage Handlers, you know, which is a local. And then I was also as a screen actor, you know. So you learn these safeties. And growing up with guns, you know what to do, you know what not to do. But so we created this world of, there's specialists, we're called weapons masters. And I've gone to some gun schools and stuff, how to handle them, and done tactical training with them. And so that gives us an edge where we're out there to make it safe. Unfortunately, we saw a situation happen last, fall, where a cinematographer was shot and killed. And that's what we try to prevent, is why that happens, is what are the protocols we do. And, of course, as we were just talking about, we're over at the theater company working on this one here, the Western, and there's going to be some gunfire on the stage. Well, these actors are not as gun savvy. So you work with them to get them in a comfort zone and to make it safe for the crew and the audience and the actors. So everybody's doing what they got to do. And I've been using
it's an important balance, you know, what you do is to make it where they can be believable and do it the right way, but also protect them at the same time. And, And
now on a film, when you're working on a film, if I was working on a film with you and you're the cowboy and they're going to be shooting you doing something with a gun, I'm actually standing about 36 inches away from you. Wow. And what you don't see that on a movie because, you know, the lens is real tight. But then out here on a stage, I might be backstage or something away from, but I still got to be able to react to it. And I will react to it if something goes wrong, goes south. But these blanks are pretty mild and all this, but they're still blanks. And that's why you practice and train with the guys so they know exactly what they're doing. And if they're not comfortable, they need to tell you, hey, I'm not real comfortable with this. And a couple of them have, and they said, well, we'll make it work. And we've changed some things with the director to make sure they're all comfortable with it. So that's what we do.
I love that. I didn't realize you were that close in the movies, but like you're doing the show at the Fredericksburg Theater Company in Fredericksburg, Texas, you know, Liberty Valance, is you're teaching people that don't know how to handle it, but you're off stage, so you're a little bit further away.
Yes, sir.
What's easier for you? What makes you more comfortable, being a little bit farther, watching it in real time, or being closer while they're filming a movie?
In the movies, I prefer being close, because actors will, if they shoot their scene, they'll just turn around and face the camera and say, okay, now what I need, or hair or makeup might step in. So what you want to do is, to protect the crew, is you walk up to the actor immediately and take the gun away from him.
Gotcha.
And say, okay, and clear the gun, make sure it's safe. And that makes the crew feel comfortable, because you're right there on top of it to make it safe. And I've worked in some pretty harsh environments. I remember we were doing a film in an apartment complex, and it wasn't in a very nice part of town, and we had a lot of gunfire. In fact, what was funny, the policemen and city councilmen were riding around in the neighborhood telling people not to return fire. It was a movie they were filming, to give you an idea about that. And the stuntman had to jump out of this window and land on a car below. And so in that scene of him moving away from the camera to jump, in that split second, I'm right there to take the gun away from him and hand him a rubber gun, so he wouldn't take the real gun out the window and jump. And so you work real close with stunt work and people like that. And so I know here's a fun scene. I'm laying in a car, I'm on the floorboard, and the guy's driving and he's shooting out the window. Well, how does he keep loading? Well, I load the gun and I would hand it up to him, and he would take the guy had a pair of guns. They've always had more than one gun. So I'm loading all these magazines, because it's a long scene. They're filming a long film, and they would edit it, right? Well, every now and then I'd forget how far I'd reach up, and all of a sudden he's driving. Now the camera would see this hand come up out of the floorboard with a gun, and he'd take and shoot out the window, and he'd go back down. So they never said anything. We kept rolling. Well, that evening we showed the rushes, and he's driving along, and all of a sudden you see this her third hand come up, hand him a gun, and he'd shoot and hand it back down, and hand the gun back. And people started laughing, and they said, we need to leave that in there. That'd be a great outtake. And I'm going, oh boy, I'm going to get fired with that. It's just, it's all by camera angles. Yeah.
Well, that's so cool. And so when we come back on the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show, we're going to ask Marvin, maybe we could talk about some of the movies and some more TV shows and just some more stories, because this is great. Sure. Thank you so much for being on, and thank you all for watching the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show, and we'll be right back.
Scott will be right back with more.
Hi, I'm Scott Knudsen, host of the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show, heard on KCAA Fridays, 3 p.m. Pacific. I'd like to talk to you about something I'm very passionate about. Those that know me know I love my coffee. In the morning, afternoon, and even late in the evening, I enjoy a good cup of coffee almost any time of the day. Now, my team at the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show has been working for several months on creating and introducing our own brand of coffee. We wanted to make sure that we got it just right. We don't want to put our name on anything unless we're 100% certain that it's the best product available, and we've finally done it. We have created a wonderful line of coffees, 13 fantastic flavors offered in whole bean, ground, and K-Cups, any way you like to brew your coffee. Now, each of our coffees carries our brand, the very same brand that we put on our horses, our trailers, and our chaps. So you know that this is a quality product. And we only use 100% Arabica beans, the very best beans available. Just listen to some of these wonderful blends and flavors. Jamaican Me Crazy, Honduran San Marcos, Chocolate Cherry Amaretto, Breakfast Blend, and my very favorite, Haley's Blend. A coffee so good, we named it after my daughter. You can order these coffees today by going online to javacowboy.com. That's javacowboy.com. And if you order today, you can get an extra 10% off your final purchase just by entering the promo code COWBOY on checkout. Remember, that's promo code COWBOY for an extra 10% off. Just go to javacowboy.com to order your coffee today. Hello, I'm Scott Knudsen, host of the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show. I want to tell you about a product I've tried and I love, and I feel the Cowboy Entrepreneur audience will as well. It's Rebellious Infusions. Rebellious Infusions, they're little packets of flavor. And you know, it gets hot in South Texas, over 100 degrees every day. And I like my water, but it's water. So I use these infusions, put them in my water. It makes it cold. It's great flavor, 0 sugar, 0 calories. It's pure energy infusions. Rebellious Infusions. Go to drinkrebellious.com or on all social media platforms. Drink Rebellious. Hi, and welcome back to the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show. I'm your host, Scott Knudsen, here with Marvin Schroeder, and we're talking, well, he's a weapons master. He's been in worked on so many movie sets and TV sets. He's a props specialist and a wrangler. And being a wrangler, talk to us a little bit about the horses in the movies and TV you've worked with.
Well, that's kind of funny because there's two types of horses on a movie. Ones that are going to follow what you tell them to do, and ones have a brain of their own. They're not.
That's like my born.
Yeah, well, I've always heard this, and I don't know if it's true or not, and cowboys will tell you and argue with this. All horses have a brain of about a 2-year-old, okay? I've always heard that. Well, I don't believe that because I believe there are some animals out there smarter than we are. They know that if they do certain things, they'll get treats or they'll get what they want, or if they just want to do what they're going to do, they're going to do it.
I agree with you.
In the movie business, it's no different, but what we've found is horses are very easy to train. And it depends on the trainers and how people handle them, I think, a lot of times, too. Horses are herd animals, as we all know, and they like being around their group. So on a certain movie I worked on, it was all about this big battle sequence in the Civil War taking place, and they wanted me to take charge of the 2-year-olds. We had about 25, 30 of them. And they were going to saddle them up, but there was not going to be no riders. It's like the riders had all been shot off, and they're going to be running around on the battlefield. And that's what they wanted. They didn't want them trained. But somebody, the head wrangler, didn't tell me this. So every morning I'd go out and feed them. And they got used to me. Well, they'd drive out with that gator, and they'd come up, and I'm an animal guy, right? So I made them like they're my babies, so to speak. So here's all these young horses, and they come up, and you got to be careful around a big bunch like that because they're nipping and kicking and biting. So I'm teaching them not to do that. So we go to the set one day, and I'm leading the gator, and here's all these animals. And he said, well, how are we going to get these animals to the set? And I said, they'll follow that gator. He said, no, they won't. They're wild. And I said, watch this. So I get in that gator, and I start pulling off. And here's 25 horses just following me like the Pied Piper. We get to the movie. We had a line of rope out there we tied them to, and they're fine, had the water. So they said, okay, they got the wranglers, would take 5 each, and they'd go up on this back battlefield, and they were going to turn them loose and just let them graze in the grass. They're going to do the battlefield. Well, these horses had not been around all of that, so they're all standing there going like, what's this? And here's these special effects guys planting all these fake charges out there. They're going to set off these bombs. So they go, action. The two armies start fighting. The bombs go off, and next thing you know, I got 25 horses back to where I was. And they're running all over the place up there looking for all these horses. And they made a beeline for that corner of that bottom of that field, right to the gate, and came straight to me. And you hear all this noise on the radio, and they go, Marvin, are the horses down there? And I said, yeah, they're all down here with me. Why? Uh-oh. Well, the horses beat feet right across that battle, and they forget it. They followed, I guess they picked up your scent or whatever, or they knew where they came from. And here they all came back to me, and the head wrangler come down, and he says, what happened? And I said, well, they all turned and bolted back to you. And I said, well, we sure can't park that big green gator back in the middle of that battlefield. That would be kind of a no-no. So what are we going to do? And he said, I don't know. So we retook that thing 4 or 5 times, and they, we spoiled them. They became our herd animals to us, and they ended up couldn't use any of that footage. It was hilarious. We shot that for 4 hours that day, but it was hilarious, Nobody got in trouble over it. It was an idea they wanted to try, and it didn't work.
It just didn't work.
No, not at all. I've worked with a lot of actors too that the worst thing an actor can do is tell you he can do something and he can't, but he just wants to get the job. And it's not saying that they're doing something wrong. It's just that they want the job and they're going to try to do it the best they can do it. Now, the good actors will come up and say, okay, I may not be as good at this, so teach me. Well, that's what then we do. So then if they'll come up and say, okay, so how do you mount? And I get a lot. You'd be surprised how many guys kind of on a horse right up and mount up on the right side. Well, it's traditional to mount on the left. If a horse is only used to that, you're not going to mount him on the right. He's going to look at you and, 2 seconds later, you're going to be somewhere else than the horse ain't, So we work with that. We do tend to get a lot of Amish horses because they're so well trained to do what they do. But it's harder to work with more of the quarter horses that are kind of wildish. They get up and get pretty crazy pretty fast, If it's a working horse, he knows how to work. People that do rodeo movies have it made because those horses know what they're doing out there. You don't want to bring a movie horse to a rodeo. That's the wrong thing. It's just the opposite.
Makes sense.
We did a movie where I was a head wrangler down in the base camp running all the animals. And we had chickens, hogs, and sheep and goats and big old longhorns running all over the place. And these longhorns were just babies. They were all pets. And the guy owned them, owned the ranch, and he's let them rent the longhorns. And every morning I'd have to go out there and feed them. And, you're a little leery of those big old horns, those longhorn, but they're like big babies. They're very docile. But this guy from New Mexico showed up with 2 big red mules, and Kate and Pearl, and they were spoiled but over intelligent. So every morning about 4:30, they would unlatch their gate and go down the rows, unlatch all the other animals' gates, let all the horses out, and go and eat their sweet feed.
Oh, my goodness.
Then run back to their fence, pull the gate shut, and sit there and hold their chin over the gate like we didn't do anything. And the wranglers have to go chase all these other horses down because they're running all over the place. And finally, one morning, I set a game camera up out there and caught them and said, okay. And I called this old boy that owned the animals, and I said, you didn't tell me they would do that. And he said, I forgot to tell you, they're over smart. They will do all kinds of stuff like that. And they're 24, they're like little kids. You got to watch them. And they just sit there and would watch you. You could tell they were thinking, what am I going to do next? But they're great animals. They pull anything, but
they're smart.
Way too smart. Yeah. Always doing something you shouldn't do. But
I love it.
Yeah. The scariest thing I did was I almost spoiled a movie we did with 2 big Great Danes. And they had 4 of them, and they were like, they had 2 sets of twins, and these ladies ran them. And so I love dogs, right? So I started talking to them. Next thing you know, the Great Danes were coming over to me, and we're all dressed in these same uniforms. Well, when they got ready to do the scene, this guy was supposed to call for them, and they would run out in the yard where we all were, and I'm standing outside. They'd come running up to me instead of going to where they were supposed to go. And they couldn't figure out why. Well, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to give them treats. So I'm giving so I had these dogs coming to me, spoiling the set. And finally the director says, well, why don't we put Marvin in the room where these officers are when they do the scene? They'll come to him anyway. They'll come into there. And that worked to a point, but it really wasn't the best system we had. So sometimes you can mess things up.
Oh my goodness. It's amazing. It's fun to hear how all the animals just keep going to you. You might have a treat or something else, but you can just tell they're attracted to you.
Yes, sir. When you being an animal person, and especially anybody that's been around horses, animals, they learn real quick who cares for them, takes care of them, and looks after them, so to speak. And they're going to come to that. I've worked with every kind of animal you can think of, but the one I'm a little bit leery working with are snakes. I'd rather have the other professionals that handle those. Think, okay, I know it's non-poisonous, but to me, they just look at you like your lunch. It's like, no, we're not doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So some of the movies you've been in and worked on, what's some that maybe stand out? Was there a particular actor or a particular scene that you were like, man, these are the moments I just love?
Well, like I said, I've got a pretty broad listing here, and I actually printed out some stuff. I can't remember it all, but the one that stands out in my mind was the hardest and the longest one I worked on was called The Patriot with Mel Gibson. And I wound up as a coordinator. We were military advisors on that. And my boss come up to me after he gets everybody in there, and I'm saying, well, good, I get to train all these American soldiers. That's what I know, right? So he hands me this British war manual and says, well, this is the 1794 foot manual on the British Army. And I'm going, what do I want that for? Well, you're going to train the British Army. I'm going, what? So I'm reading the script. We're all reading the script, and here's all this big British Army. So I get 500 extras show up, and they advertise, we want guys 18 to 40 with long hair. What do you think you're going to get?
Oh, yeah.
So I got a third bikers, a third hillbillies, and a third college kids. And I got to make an army out of this.
Oh, my.
So we spent 2 months out there on a farm and training these guys from zero. Now, I'm the captain. Well, I'm the colonel, and I had captains. So I told the company commanders, I said, okay, tell you what, let's give them something back for their effort, what they're doing. Let them elect their own first sergeant. And that's a great idea. They came back the next Saturday and they said, we've elected our first sergeants. You know what they elected? Every one of those companies elected a biker as their first sergeant. And I thought that was very interesting.
That is. So,
and the way I did that, it's kind of weird you're going to why. Well, what did we? I think it was just their strength and leadership, and those bike clubs they're very organized in their own world, and I think it was that. But what I did is I split them up. So I took a biker, a hillbilly, and a college kid, if you would, and make them a team, and so I split all the companies that way. Then I said, how many of you guys got brothers out? They raised their hand. Well, I split the brothers up. How many of your father and sons? I split them up. So they're all in a brand new world. They didn't know each other, so they had to work together, and it worked out great. And that movie, we marched 10,000 miles.
Oh, I love that backstory.
Yeah, we just marched everywhere to the set and back, and we'd get out there, and we had more fun just harassing the other side, which is the good guys actually in the movie, and we picked on them constantly, and because we could march and drill, and these guys got very good at it. They knew what they were doing with those muskets, and they were just very good. The safety guys go up. Yeah, we had the stuntmen show up. There's like 60 of them, and I've worked with several of them. And the lead stunt guy comes up to me and he says, "Oh, this is going to be great. We know Marvin. We know what to do." So they get in the ranks. So they didn't know how to march and drill, right? All my guys did. So right off the bat, you could just spot a stuntman because he just didn't fit. And finally, they came up the next day and said, "Okay, what do we need to do to get up to speed?" And I said, "Fall into those companies and listen to what they're telling you. They'll teach you." And I let them teach your own people.
I love it. Yeah. You set up your own military, basically.
It's exactly what it was, yes. And what the funniest part was when the 4 British actors that were all British in the movie, they came up to me one day and says, "Well, we want to meet this colonel, so my boss brings them over to me." And they're all in their costumes, getting ready. And here's the guy playing Tabington, the bad guy. And he's a great actor. And he's a comedian as heck. And they come up and says, "Well, here's the colonel. This is our colonel that was leading." Oh, and Tom Wilkerson, the lead actor, comes up. "So where are you from?" And I start talking. He says, "Oh, my God, you're not English." And I said, "No, I'm from Texas." And they all just this scared look on their face. "You're from Texas?"
Yeah.
You're training this army. And it was hilarious because they didn't expect that.
I love that.
A turning point. They're going like, wow. And, the compliments from them was, "Wow, you're good. You really, these guys are good." And I said, "Well, tell the guys that. They would appreciate that." So
that is so wonderful. So is Mel Gibson, is he as funny as he seems?
All the time. He is a class act. And he's always making jokes and doing fun stuff. And for that role for him to get so serious, and there were several scenes in there that were very, very serious. And when the scene where he gets his youngest son gets killed, and watching him turn in that movie and all the actors come around that, rally around that. And my guys then are the ultimate bad guys, we're the British, and to watch that whole thing. And they took some turns with the history that wasn't 100% correct, but it plays well. But Mel Gibson was always funny. He was late for a rehearsal one morning, and they'd flown him to New York from South Carolina to do an interview about the movie, right? They fly him back. He's dead tired. Well, they brought him to the field where we were practicing the scene, and he's supposed to be on horseback, and he's in civvies. So he's standing there just tired as heck, and I'm on my horse, and I says, what are you doing here? Because he come walking down this dirt road in his civvy clothes. And I said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, I'm supposed to be doing this scene." "You're supposed to be at base camp in hair and makeup." And he says, "Well, my car left, and I take my horse." And he jumped on my horse and takes off and rides off and comes back about 30 minutes later, all dressed up. And my horse is cavalry trained. And he goes, "That's a better horse than I'm riding." "Oh, no, you ain't getting my horse. You get my horse back." He wanted my horse, So, yeah, he was comical pretty much.
I love that. So what's another movie or TV show that people will know that you were affiliated with?
Well, like I say, I did the Rough Riders in '96, but in 2004, I worked with the Alamo. We shot over in Dripping Springs, and I was the head wrangler down to the base camp with that. So you don't get to see me on that one, but I've had a couple of speaking parts, and not big. That's not my job. But then all of a sudden, going like, wait a minute, if Marvin just trained his British Army, we need him to be the colonel on the field. So if you watch The Patriot and watch that British Army, the guy on the black horse all everywhere, that was me, awesome. And I had a couple of lines in that. But pretty much that's what I kind of do. And if people like horror movies, Friday the 13th, we did all the weapons for that. And we had an actor who was a great guy, was Arlie Ermey, played the sheriff in that. And he kept wanting to buy some of the guns I had. And I said, "You live in California. I can't sell it to you." And he says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Move to Texas. Come here. We're gun happy over here. We got guns everywhere. Everybody can buy guns." And he goes, "I might have to do that." He never did, but it was kind of funny. So, yeah.
Oh, my
we've done a lot of stuff like that. There was a war movie I did, which is funny, too. It was called Wind Talkers. And we filmed that in Hawaii. So here's a funny thing. They filmed Jurassic Park over there, right? In the north part of the island. Well, they went out there and dug these big old giant footprints in the ground out there for the footprints of the Tyrannosaurus Rex. So here's all these Marines were running out there practicing. They all jumped in these holes. They thought they were like foxholes for them. They weren't. And they had these cameras on a crane looking down on them. And I'm turning to this first AD and I said, we can't use this part of the area. And they go, why not? They already dug the holes for us. I said, no, sir. Get the Marines out of the holes and look at the holes again. So you're looking at, and it looked like the footprints of Tyrannosaurus Rex. Here's all these Marines in it, right? And it's like, we're going to have to change the location here, guys. Marvin's got a good point, but I was the military historical advisor for that. So again,
I think you nailed it on that one.
Yeah, that was another tough one because we had to train all these Asian folks to play the Japanese, and these guys were great. They did a good job with that.
That was awesome.
I understand that, yeah.
So when we come back on the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show, we're going to take another quick break. We'll have a few more stories, talk a little bit more about gun safety, about the show that he's working on right now at the theater, the live theater show, and just get a little bit more stories. So we'll be right back with the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show.
Thank you for listening to the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show. Scott will be right back with more. For more information on Scott Knudsen, the Cowboy Entrepreneur, visit us online at cowboyentrepreneur.com.
Hi, I'm Scott Knudsen, host of the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show, heard on KCAA Fridays, 3 p.m. Pacific. I'd like to talk to you about something I'm very passionate about. Those that know me know I love my coffee. In the morning, afternoon, and even late in the evening, I enjoy a good cup of coffee almost any time of the day. Now, my team at the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show has been working for several months on creating and introducing our own brand of coffee. We wanted to make sure that we got it just right. We don't want to put our name on anything unless we're 100% certain that it's the best product available, and we've finally done it. We have created a wonderful line of coffees, 13 fantastic flavors offered in whole bean, ground, and K-Cups, any way you like to brew your coffee. Now, each of our coffees carries our brand, the very same brand that we put on our horses, our trailers, and our chaps. So you know that this is a quality product. And we only use 100% Arabica beans, the very best beans available. Just listen to some of these wonderful blends and flavors. Jamaican Me Crazy, Honduran San Marcos, Chocolate Cherry Amaretto, Breakfast Blend, and my very favorite, Haley's Blend. A coffee so good, we named it after my daughter. You can order these coffees today by going online to javacowboy.com. That's javacowboy.com. And if you order today, you can get an extra 10% off your final purchase just by entering the promo code COWBOY on checkout. Remember, that's promo code COWBOY for an extra 10% off. Just go to javacowboy.com to order your coffee today. Hello, I'm Scott Knudsen, host of the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show. I want to tell you about a product I've tried and I love, and I feel the Cowboy Entrepreneur audience will as well. It's Rebellious Infusions. Rebellious Infusions, there are little packets of flavor. And it gets hot in South Texas, over 100 degrees every day. And I like my water, but it's water. So I use these infusions, put them in my water. It makes it cold. It's great flavor, 0 sugar, 0 calories. It's pure energy infusions. Rebellious Infusions. Go to drinkrebellious.com or on all social media platforms. Drink Rebellious. Hi, and welcome back to the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show. I'm your host, Scott Knudsen, and thank you so much for watching or listening to us today here with Marvin Schroeder. And we're talking movies, TV. Marvin's a weapon master, and he's done so much. And today we're catching him. He's at the Fredericksburg Theater Company in Fredericksburg, Texas, and he's working on The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. And all the weapons are going to be authentic, and it's just such a blessing to have such a specialist, someone so knowledgeable at the theater, making sure this production is even at a higher level. And we were just talking about some of the movies and some of the stories that he's worked on and love it. He's also started a foundation. It was a Frontier History company. Would you mind just talking a little bit about that and how you started that?
Yeah, I've been doing, like say, history for a long time and stuff. And, I'm kind of the manager over at Fort Martin Scott here, which is the oldest frontier post in Texas. And so I've got all these volunteers. We dress up and we'll do soldiers, we'll do cowboys, we'll do whatever. Well, our foundation, with all these different people I've worked with over the years, you've got Native Americans, you've got the vaqueros, you've got all these different walks of life. I kept thinking, what if there's a place where we can get all these people together and teach that history? And that's what we're doing. And so for Liberty Balance, where there's three of us that from our company that are playing parts in the thing, and we're just having fun with that. So it's just a way to teach history about the frontier. But here's the trick on that. It's called Frontier Company. It's not a company of military. It's a company of people.
Love it.
So if you pick a frontier, if you land at New York in 1493, what's the rest of the country? It's a frontier. So we do any time period, anything, and about any kind of part of the history, and we're expanding that to where more people that just don't know their history get to see somebody live and in person interpreting it for them and talking about it.
I love that so much. And history is so important, not only in movies and TV, but just throughout the day. It's so good to have that knowledge. So how can people find that if they want to look it up?
They can look us up on the internet. We're brand new. We just got established with this company, or the foundation, or they can get a hold of me or whatever through this, and I'll give you a contact point. And we're just trying to figure out different ways to do that because I really want to get out there and reach out. We do school programs. I was down in Kerrville last Friday with over 600 school kids from junior high to high school, and watch them light up, and they get to see these guys walk around talking about this stuff and going, how many kids can name you the 4 poisonous snakes of Texas? The country kids can. Most of the city kids can't. What do you eat? How do you survive? How long did it take you to ride a horse from San Antonio to Fredericksburg? Well, I came up here in an hour and a half. Well, try 3 weeks. And they look at you like, what? So they don't realize that, and the scale of what it took. And
it makes you appreciate the people before you so much more when they understand the stories.
Right. Yes, it does. And especially when you get you get in talking about horses, if I had a choice and I was on the frontier, I wouldn't ride a horse. I'd ride a mule. And people go, why? Well, mules will look for water, and they're also more sure-footed. And mule is not going to outrun what he thinks he can't do. Whereas a horse, he gets to a point, he's going to stop. Yeah. Well, a mule paces himself. You can run from a mule all day long, but he eventually will get you. And that's why, of course, a lot of our Western lawmen, especially Texas Rangers, always had big mule trains. There's a great story about a company of Rangers out in West Texas that got jumped by a far superior bunch of Indians. They turned the mules loose. Guess who beat them back to camp were the mules. They never lost a mule. They all turned and went right straight back to their camp. They knew where to go. And that's that company commander of the Rangers goes, wow, maybe we should switch these horses out, make them carry the load and we ride the mules, So, yeah.
Isn't that something? That's all. I think that's so fascinating to know that.
Right.
But people wouldn't know it if you didn't share the stories. That's why it's so important.
Exactly.
And
how many plants can you name that you can eat off the ground and survive on? And most people go, what? Well, sow thistle, that's a weed. They're going like, no, it's edible. It's just like lettuce. They're going, oh, wow. Watercress, it's in the waters, So you teach all that. You're going out there and you're showing that. And people are going, wow, we didn't think about that. Now, I always ask kids, well, if we're looking for fresh meat, what would you get? Well, I want to get a cow. And I said, well, you do that and the farmer's going to shoot you. And they're going, what do you mean? Well, you can't go after cows. They're not wild. Deer, rabbit, and stuff like that, and they're going, oh, okay. So it's teaching them that, how to live off that land and what did your forefathers do? Where'd they come from? How do we learn all that?
Knowledge is power, and everybody says it, but it really is. And somebody maybe doesn't have to go eat off the land, but them walking through a state park and they see that, instantly they're going to think of what you told them. And I think that's especially for them to understand, and hopefully they share that with the next generation.
Exactly. That's what we do.
I love it. So, man, we're almost through at the end of the show. I can't believe it's already almost over. It's killing me because I want to hear some more stories. So real quickly, tell us maybe something they don't do in movies or TV with guns that used to be the fact. Maybe it's strapping it to the leg. Maybe they didn't do that, or having a shoulder holster or something. What's something you see that's not really right?
Well, and that's a good point because now remember, if most of us older generation grew up in the 30s, 40s, 50s, they were using whatever they had at the time. They did not realize that a Buscadero rig, which is the gun holster cut through the belt instead of looped over the belt, which is a double loop or whatever. They didn't also realize that you didn't carry that gun off your leg tied down. and it was tied level across your waist, so you see that and you're going like, it didn't take rocket science nowadays to get pictures. And our information is out there. Get pictures. Look at how they dressed in 1920. That's what they wore. How did they dress in 1850? There's pictures. There's histories that you read it, you look at it. And a lot of your older leather makers can go, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. And so get it correct. And that's what we do. A lot of people question, well, did they really do cross draw? Yes, a lot of people did. Did they carry more than one gun? Sure they did. Because if you got a 6-shooter, that's all it shoots until you reload it. And it doesn't load automatically. You got to hand load that thing. You got to be ready to go. And taking a rifle, that's a single shot. And how many times can you load that thing in a minute? Soldiers are trained to load 3 rounds a minute with those things. Well, you know how much practice that takes? Then you get into more of the modern weaponry at the time. And a smart cowboy in the West, would carry his pistol and his rifle with the same ammunition. A lot of people don't realize that.
There you go.
So that I've got one belt on. If I'm wearing a double belt with a double ammunition, I've got one ammunition does the same job.
Okay? I love that. I never crossed my mind. That's brilliant.
If you're going after bigger game, you're going to want a heavier load, like 45-70 or something up in that line. But rank and file, you're going to want a 44-40, which carried the same round in the pistol, same round in the rifle, and it would do all the job you need to do.
I love that. So you see them carrying a rifle, and they have 2 on their belt, two pistols on their belt. Where was the perfect hiding spot for that third pistol? Was it in the boot? Was it inside the vest? Or where would somebody hide it?
They carry it on the belt. You didn't really hide that other pistol. Now, you had Derringers. You had more pocket pistols. Here's the thing about Colt manufacturing. The most popular pistol ever made was the 1849 pocket pistol. It was in 31 caliber. And you could put it in a vest. You can put it in a pocket. You can put it in your purse or whatever. But they sold more of those than they sold anything else in the 1900s.
Wow.
And people don't realize that. You think, it's the big old pistol on your hip. No, it's a pocket pistol. It served more people than you did. Yeah.
Concealed.
They're concealed. And just like today, I've got a concealed license. Well, back then, if you could conceal it, yes, but there was also a part about it. Put it out there where everybody saw it. They knew this guy's armed. The way he's carrying it, they could tell he was the right man for the job.
I love that. I love that so much. Well, I appreciate you so much for being on the show. So real quickly, what's next for you besides The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance at the Fredericksburg Theater?
Well, like I say, we're still developing our program. We're trying to figure out, where do we want to go next with this foundation? And we look for a place to be able to set up and educate with it. You just never know. People call you and say, hey, I've got a little show here. And when I got that call for doing the movie 1883 up there in Fort Worth, we went up there and shot that. It was a couple weeks up there doing a major scene with a lot of guns. And so I never know where it's going to come from. You just don't.
Isn't that fun? Isn't that great?
You know what they say about movie work? It's 9 times sheer panic and then 1% fun, but it is fun. Especially if you know what you're doing and you make it safe, you make everybody feel comfortable from the production down to the actors to every across the board. They get out there and they know they got a guy that knows what he's doing. That's the key to it. That's where you count.
I love that so much. Well, Marvin, thank you so much for being on our show today. And thank you for watching and listening to the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show. And man, it was such a great time. It just went so fast.
Thank y'all for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you to all the great sponsors of the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show. If you or your business is interested in being a sponsor of the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show, please call our office at 830-992-1786 or visit our website, cowboyentrepreneur.com.
Scott Knudsen, host of the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show, heard on KCAA Fridays, 3 p.m. Pacific. I'd like to talk to you about something I'm very passionate about. Those that know me know I love my coffee. In the morning, afternoon, and even late in the evening, I enjoy a good cup of coffee almost any time of the day. Now, my team at the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show has been working for several months on creating and introducing our own brand of coffee. We wanted to make sure that we got it just right. We don't want to put our name on anything unless we're 100% certain that it's the best product available, and we've finally done it.
We have created a wonderful line of coffees, 13 fantastic flavors offered in whole bean, ground, and K-Cups. Any way you like to brew your coffee. Now, each of our coffees carries our brand, the very same brand that we put on our horses, our trailers, and our chaps. So you know that this is a quality product. And we only use 100% Arabica beans, the very best beans available. Just listen to some of these wonderful blends and flavors. Jamaican Me Crazy, Honduran San Marcos, Chocolate Cherry Amaretto, Breakfast Blend, and my very favorite, Haley's Blend. A coffee so good, we named it after my daughter. You can order these coffees today by going online to javacowboy.com. That's javacowboy.com. And if you order today, you can get an extra 10% off your final purchase just by entering the promo code COWBOY on checkout. Remember, that's promo code COWBOY for an extra 10% off. Just go to javacowboy.com to order your coffee today.
Hello, I'm Scott Knudsen, host of the Cowboy Entrepreneur Show. I want to tell you about a product I've tried and I love, and I feel the Cowboy Entrepreneur audience will as well. It's Rebellious Infusions. Rebellious Infusions, they're little packets of flavor. And you know, it gets hot in South Texas, over 100 degrees every day. And I like my water, but it's water. So I use these infusions, put them in my water. It makes it cold. It's great flavor, 0 sugar, 0 calories. It's pure energy infusions. Rebellious Infusions. Go to drinkrebellious.com or on all social media platforms. Drink Rebellious.
Now you can listen to KCAA Radio anytime on